Hello everyone! I am of the opinion that there comes a day for everyone that they want to change their wardrobe. And that day has definitely come for me. I have been thinking for a really long time about changing my wardrobe into something somewhat more historical. And I have come into possession of these amazing books on creating, cutting and styling historical garments, particularly from the 1920s. I've been looking forward to working with them as they feature such valuable information about the fashion of that time.
1920s faced a movement towards simplicity. The dresses became shorter, the waist dropped to create the mid-war style that is probably most associated with flapper girls, who were an embodiment of parties. Short hair, cigarette in hand, constantly looking for entertainment. They were often seen as embracing a controversial lifestyle for the time. However, looking at the fashion of the 1920s, we can see that it significantly differed from the styles of the previous decades, as well as the styles that came after. Women desired freedom for their bodies, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and to break away from the restrictions of the 19th century. In comparison to previous fashions where the curves and shapes of women's bodies were emphasized and enhanced, we can see the drastic change to garments that were designed to hide all those curves. Even though my heart cultivates love for the Victorian and Edwardian fashions, I also know that it might be less practical for my everyday needs. I am planning to make 19th century garments as my future projects, but today I am beginning to build my historical wardrobe from a 1920s chemise. It's not only quite simple in construction and shape, but also much shorter. It's not as covering and modest, which means it will hide better underneath a wider variety of garments. But at the same time, it will still present itself gracefully and elegantly.
As you can see, the collection comprises of 13 books. Today, I'll be focusing on underwear and lingerie, which will help me construct a pattern for a chosen design. The book gives many different variations of the same garments and clearly describes how to make the pattern, cut the fabric, and then put the garment together, as well as decorate it. There are drawings and photographs complementing the instructions, which makes it much easier to understand. However, this book requires prior knowledge on dressmaking, so it might not be suitable for beginners. The design I chose is for a gotted chemise. It features lace insertions as decoration, but overall the design is quite simple. Looking at the patterns, I gathered that most of them are constructed from simple panels, with a width of a measurement slightly larger than a person's hips. After establishing the widths, I had to do some calculations in order to figure out if the pattern would fit me. It turned out that if I cut the panels straight, with the width of a measurement of my hips with added ease, the top would be too loose on my chest, so I decided to reduce that amount by making the panels more A-shaped. I also decided the length of the chemise to be 70 cm plus 5 cm for the cuff on the top, as I thought this length would best suit my needs. The measurements for drafting the gottet are given, and it measures 9 inches, which is around 23 cm at the widest part. And then the length on the center line is 12 inches, around 31 cm. With this established, I can proceed to draft the pattern and make the mock-up. The straps will be added later as they are quite simple in construction. After constructing the pattern, I had to make a quick mock-up to make sure everything fits me well. Mock-ups are necessary if you want your garments to look professional. Our bodies are all different and there are no standard patterns that will fit everyone. I also marked the length of the straps and where they would sit on the chemise. I wanted to show you the fabrics I'm planning to use. I thought that linen would be a good choice as it's breathable and light. That would be the main fabric. And for the godets, I would go for this beautiful cotton that I had for years in my stash. Now, for the lace insertions, I found some cotton lace. And for the bottom hem, this nice trim. Now, a few seconds break. I had to show you my outfit. I think Amelia Bloom would be very proud of me. I have to admit that cutting fabric is my least favorite part of the whole process, but it was done for centuries by old dressmakers, so who am I to complain? It's important to mark your lines well, both the stitching lines and the seam allowance lines for easier cutting. I'm using a pen that disappears when exposed to heat, which means it will be gone after ironing. Now it's time for sewing. I'm carefully basting the side seams and the godets in place to make sure they don't move when I place the lace. There is no need to stitch them with the machine as they will soon be undone and most of the seam allowance will be cut and turned to expose the lace. After gently pressing the seam allowances open, I have to trim them, as otherwise they will be caught in the seams when stitching the lace. The instructions clearly state to leave around 2.5 inches at the top for the cuff and for the remaining space to be French seamed on the outside, as the cuff will be turned to the right side of the fabric. To place the lace, I use my ironing board to lay the chemise flat and separate the front from the back. Pinning the lace flat is important, so that it's even on all seams. Then, I also basted it to get rid of the pins. I decided to sew the lace in by hand, as I thought it will be more neat. It allows me more control over the stitching and the fabric, although it does take significantly more time. After the stitching is complete, I can remove the basting and trim the rest of the seam allowances, just so that I can fell them narrowly on the edges. Then, it was time to mark the position of the cuff and finally use my sewing machine. Underwear and lingerie, page 21. Now, take the length of insertion equal to the size of the chemise at the top, plus hem allowances, and finish both raw edges. Baste the insertion over the raw edge of the hem that finishes the chemise, with the opening at the center front and the hemmed edges of the insertion just meeting. Stitch on both edges. I also decided to add a trim above the insertion as I thought it would look nice and more interesting. After all, I resigned from the lace for the bottom as it didn't fit the rest of the lace that well. Instead, I tried out an accessory that came with the machine. It's called a hammer. After testing it out, I was more confident to use it on my chemise, and I think the effect was better than expected. Unfortunately, it couldn't do the thicker parts, so I finished them by hand. The straps were the last element and the simplest one to construct. Once done, it was time to dress up and present the final effect.